welcome back to another video from HLHReviews. With the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, we now have 14 films in the X-Men franchise. I've only reviewed Deadpool and Wolverine, but I'll save me reviewing the rest of this franchise when we get the X-Men in the MCU. But today, I'll be ranking all of the X-Men films, all the way from the original X-Men to Dark Phoenix, as well as the 3 Deadpool films, and the spin-off, The New Mutants. Before I rank these, though, I should, quickly say that I have early vague memories of, the first 3 X-Men films, but beyond that, the rest of this franchise was a first-time watch, and what really struck me was just the overall quality of this franchise. Like, my top 6 are, easily some of the best superhero movies I ever watched, while some of the bottom were a bit of a struggle to sit through. But go ahead and, please do me a favor and tell me how you would rank these movies down in the comments below. This isn't a ranking for you or for someone else. This is just my personal ranking with my personal opinions, but go ahead and do tell me how you would rank these movies down in the comments and we can all have fun. So let's go ahead and get this thing started at number 14, the worst of the X-Men films. And that for me is going to be going to this franchise's only spinoff, The New Mutants. Now, out of the whole franchise, this is the only one of the 2 bad movies in my ranking that was just a struggle to sit through. And, after watching, the disappointing Dark Phoenix, I thought to myself, well, I may as well just go ahead and get this thing out of the way before I go watch Logan, which I've heard everyone praise about. Oh, what a decision I made. The basic gist of this film is that you have Danny Moonstar, who is taken to this facility with these other mutant kids to learn their powers and how to control them, when in reality it's a front, to have these kids be taken to Essex Corporation as shown in Logan, and the head of this facility is under orders to kill Moonstar. And while I don't think that was a terrible concept by any means, what kills this is how boring the movie is. I mean, I'm not going to say that my next pick is a thrill ride by any means, but, you have these kids, none of them really stand out beyond what their powers are. Anna Taylor-Joy's character, all she is just a bitch throughout the entire runtime. And so none of these characters were all that interesting to me, especially the lead of Moonstar. And I saw that twist of this facility being a front so they can send these kids to the Essex Corporation a fucking mile away. The main villain was so generic. And that third act final battle involving this, bear just comes out of nowhere. And you also have, writing issues that they don't make sense to me. You have Moonstar and Sinclair, who turns into a werewolf. You have these two be a lesbian couple, even though Sinclair is religious. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. I'm not an overly religious person, but when you have a character who is, to be religious and praying to God and all this, and you make her a lesbian, I'm sorry, that just does not work for me in the slightest. The only thing that really stands out about this is that they try to make this a horror film where you have Moonstar essentially being the one responsible for, bringing these visions to life, and honestly, that whole thing of trying to make this a horror film, it just feels so out of place, and the horror aspects that they go for are not even scary or interesting in the slightest. For as much as I don't like my next pick, and we're gonna get there, at least that movie had a purpose to exist. The New Mutants is the most pointless film in this entire franchise because no follow-up to it was ever made because of the acquisition deal between Fox and Disney. I mean, seriously, what is the point of this film's existence since it adds nothing and it doesn't move the franchise anywhere? Look, I've had enough, okay? Just The New Mutants, number 14, easily the worst that this franchise has given us. Coming in at number 13 is X-Men Origins Wolverine. Look, I kind of wish that the New Mutants didn't exist, just so I could put this at the bottom. But, before I go over my issues, let's go over the basics of what I liked. The obvious one to get out of the way is, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. You can see, even in this one, how much passion he has playing this character ever since the original X-Men. Liev Schreiber, he gives a good performance of Sabretooth, even though it's not it's not at all the same character as we saw in the original X-Men, and I'll get to that. The movie, unlike the New Mutants, it can be entertaining at times, just because it has some decent action scenes. Beyond that, this movie was just flat out terrible. The film is meant to be a prequel to the original X-Men, and honestly, a prequel that is centered on the Wolverine character doesn't sound like a bad idea, but it's done so poorly executed. The film has terrible CGI, or more specifically, the way Wolverine's claws look in the film. It literally looks like the way you would see from a cartoon in the 90s, and honestly, I don't know how you fuck up Wolverine's claws since they looked good in the original trilogy, but whatever, I didn't work on this movie. They also shoehorned in a bunch of characters who basically serve no purpose, or much less even were mentioned in the original trilogy. You have characters like the Blob and Deadpool, which I will get to. And you also get Gambit here, who probably is the only one, that doesn't feel generic out of them all, but he just serves little narrative importance in the film. Not to mention how they completely flat out make this, inconsistencies of, you have Sabretooth here, aside from his claws, he literally looks like a normal human being in this one, even though he looked like a humanoid tiger in both the original X-Men and in the recent Deadpool vs. Wolverine. The prequel stuff that they do is not satisfying in the slightest. And look, I know that this is a dead horse at this point, but what the hell were they attempting with this version of Deadpool? I know that they wanted to keep the film PG-13 and all, but even if you were going to do a wildly different take on Deadpool, which, first of all, shame on you for thinking you can do that, but you need to make it make sense, and the way they do it in the movie, it just flat out didn't. So, yeah, nothing more I can say about this one. Number 13, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now that we got the bad movies out of the way, it's time to get to the mediocre ones, to come on in here. So, coming in at number 12 is Dark Phoenix. It's honestly a downer that they decided to cap this one as the finale of this side of the X-Men, introducing X-Men First Class, which you're definitely going to see a bit higher on here. In terms of what I liked in this one, I think the cast, is just as good as ever, including James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. Sophie Turner does great, both in her Jean Grey and Dark Phoenix side, and I really enjoyed that train sequence at the end. But the rest of this film was so average and just about as how disappointing you can get. For as much as I like seeing James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender playing the young versions of Charles Xavier and Magneto respectively, their characters in this film are just not as likable as they were in the previous films. Characters like Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Quicksilver are so pushed to the side. It's to the point where it just feels like, they have hardly any importance in this film other than to have, a cool moment in an action scene. And while this one might be a better attempt of telling the Dark Phoenix side than what you got in X-Men 3 The Last Stand, which, it was more of her being Dark Phoenix in that than Jean Grey, but even the way they put it, or the way they execute in this one, it just did not work for me all that much. I was not a fan of the main villains that we get here, involving these aliens. And I especially did not like the way they decided to kill off Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, because, in my opinion, I liked her Mystique more than Rebecca Romijn's in the original trilogy. It's such a huge disappointment that they decided to end this side of the X-Men here. Granted, the acquisition between Fox and Disney happened 3 months before the release of this film, along with, the reshoots that happened. but my god, this could have been so much better than what we get. So, Dark Phoenix, you're landing at number 12. Coming in at number 11 is X-Men 3: The Last Stand. This one is definitely the weakest of the original trilogy, although the third weakest if you want to count X-Men Origins Wolverine. So what I liked about X-Men 3: The Last Stand is I liked seeing the development that Wolverine gets in here with, his struggles with Jean Grey now that she's turned into the Dark Phoenix, and I liked, how he has to kill her so he can save everybody in the third act. I really like Kelsey Grammer's as a Beast here. There's some entertaining action scenes, from the opening with those digital sentinels, all the way to, this mutant rebellion on Alcatraz Island and seeing Magneto lifting the Golden Gate Bridge. But what I did not like was seeing, the Dark Phoenix side of Jean Grey just felt pushed to the side when they could have, done something more with it. You have this cure of curing of mutants and all, and then, Rogue's development of getting the cure so she could finally feel somewhat normal and, touch someone like Iceman, after seeing him with Kitty Pryde. I like the ideas there, but they could have executed, it better. Angel just felt like he was here, just for the sake of it, just for the sake of, having another mutant. I did not like the way that they decided to handle Iceman and Pyro's rivalry with each other, and the way they handled Cyclops' death as if he wasn't an important character in the previous two movies. Oh, is that borderline infuriating. I also felt that the fates of, Charles Xavier and Magneto, they weren't really all that satisfying, which, thankfully Days of Future Past reversed their fates in a way. So yeah, X-Men 3: The Last Stand is a weak end to the original trilogy, but, it could still be an entertaining X-Men movie, and to be fair, I wouldn't mind watching it if I was in a binging mood. Coming into the top 10 with number 10 being X-Men Apocalypse. Now, this one was obviously a step down to how great and fantastic X-Men Days of Future Past was, but just like The Last Stand, this movie can be an entertaining X-Men movie. I really liked, the new cast members who play the younger versions of Cyclops, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, and Storm. Although, granted, she's a villain here and not an X-Men yet. Charles Xavier and Magneto have really good character development in this one. Magneto specifically with, the tragedy of his family that happens in the second act. And then, changing back, to fight against Apocalypse, who is this first mutant, the most powerful mutant. Oscar Isaac, he gives a really good performance as the character of Apocalypse, and I liked Mystique's development as someone, that doesn't see herself being a hero, to essentially being an X-Men member again just to take down Apocalypse. But the two things that hold this one back for me is that you have Apocalypse, who we are told as the first mutant and the most powerful mutant, who wants to end the world so that he can rule it himself. And it doesn't really feel like that because it becomes this generic world dominator villain, just so the X-Men can fight in the third act. And that one moment of Quicksilver, not being able to say to Magneto that, he's his son and that, he's his father and everything, it's like, well, what the fuck's the point of that? Because they don't bother bring that up again in Dark Phoenix, so I don't understand the point of that even being in the movie. But I do overall, still find this one to be entertaining. And I personally, because of how disappointing Dark Phoenix was, if I'm in the mood, to binge through this franchise again, I like to think that this side of the X-Men ends here. Now, is it a great conclusion to this side of the X-Men? No. But it's satisfying enough of me to act like this side, of the X-Men characters ends here, and I can now watch movies that I really enjoy, which I will get to in a bit. Now, 9 and onwards, these are pretty much movies that I enjoy, that I can recommend, and I can pretty much see myself giving a positive review for them, so these are the movies in the franchise that I'm all for the ride that they give me, essentially. So coming at number 9 is going to be The Wolverine, which is the second film in the standalone Wolverine trilogy. Now, this one was pretty good. You have Wolverine, who is now essentially a loner after killing Jean Grey in The Last Stand, and he goes to Japan to visit a Hiroshima soldier who he saved, and then it evolves into, him losing his regeneration abilities for a bit, as these agents from Japan are hunting him down, and he has to protect, Mariko, sorry if I butchered that up. The film has really good action scenes involving the agents, and I like seeing the journey that he goes through to get over his trauma of killing Jean Grey by protecting this, Japanese woman who is connected to all of what's going on in this movie. Now, the only thing that holds it back a little bit is that the third act involving this lizard lady, I don't remember the name, and, that silver Transformers looking robot looked like it was something from, a kaiju thing. Well, it's entertaining, but, it does hold back on the film a little bit for having these two great acts and then kind of having a messy third act. But I still enjoy The Wolverine, and I love how it essentially opens up to, the Days of Future Past. So, The Wolverine at number 9. Coming at number 8 is Deadpool 2. This one is definitely the weakest of the Deadpool movies, but I still find it to be a solid sequel to the first Deadpool movie. I like the way that, this movie opens up with Vanessa's death, and then Deadpool, meets this kid named Fire Fist who he has to protect to make sure he doesn't become a killer. Cable was a good character along with Domino. There's plenty of laughs to have here, especially when Deadpool forms the X-Force. And then the team, except Deadpool and Domino, get all killed in silly ways. Ryan Reynolds just flat out kills it as Deadpool as he did in the first Deadpool movie. And I did enjoy, that post-credit scene at the end of him fixing timelines. The only thing I didn't like is that I wasn't all that enamored with the actor who plays Fire Fist. For me, I did not like the delivery of his lines, and I found him to be annoying at times. But nevertheless, I enjoyed Deadpool 2, and it's a very solid follow-up to the first Deadpool movie. Coming in at number 7 is going to be X-Men First Class, the only solid prequel that in this entire franchise. It basically tells the origin story of how Charles Xavier formed the X-Men team, and as well as telling us the origin of Magneto. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, they give great performances, and they were just both perfectly cast to play the younger versions of both Charles Xavier and Magneto. Mystique is a really good character here, and I like seeing the development of, having to hide of, her odd appearance and having to, hide as this human. And, she starts out as this good character, then gets seduced by Magneto and, her eventual joining with him in the third act. You also get the young version of Dr. Hank McCoy and his eventual transformation into Beast. Kevin Bacon's character was a really great villain, and I liked how his villain gives you even more of an understanding of Magneto's motivations throughout the original trilogy. It has great action scenes, especially by that well-done third act battle, and even seeing Magneto lifting that submarine was awesome. There were two things that I didn't like. The first thing was that I did not like the way Beast looked in this. It reminded me way too much of that werewolf from the It miniseries, or hell, even Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman for that matter. They do winks and nods to the audience of the original X-Men trilogy, and while some of these, didn't bother me that much, the one that crossed the line for me was having Mystique hanging out with these other mutants, and then, she just says, "Oh, hey, we were coming up with names for each other, so you, Charles, should be Professor X, and Eric, you should be Magneto." And so you're just sitting there like, you seriously could not have found a better way for Charles and Eric to get their names instead of just shitty, like just basically doing it shitty like that. But, I still enjoyed X-Men First Class. It's a solid prequel to the first X-Men, and I wouldn't mind putting this one first before I watched the original X-Men. Starting with number 6 and onwards, these are movies that are just easily the best that this franchise had to give us. And some of these are in, my list for, greatest superhero movies ever made. So coming at number 6 is the one that started this entire franchise, the original X-Men from 2000. Now, look, has this movie aged? Yeah, obviously. Can it be lackluster when you compare it to the comic book movies of today? Or at the very least, the MCU's golden era? Yeah, it can be that way, but I still found this movie to be pretty damn solid. Even for a superhero movie that was filmed in my birth year of 1999 and released in 2000. Everyone in here, was perfectly casted, from Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, and, Gandalf himself, Ian McKellen as Magneto. All the characters are likable, including Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, and, even Rogue, where I really liked, the development that she got as a character in this. And, Wolverine essentially, almost ends up feeling like a second parent to her in a way. I like how it reveals what Magneto wants to do with her involving this machine so that he can essentially make humans mutants, not knowing, of course, that it would end up killing them. There's a lot of great action in this, from scenes like the bar fight in the first act, the Saber-Tooth fight, and even the Ellis Island section in the third act. This movie has aged and can be lackluster when you compare it to, the comic book movies that we would get the following decade. But I still find the original X-Men a great, as a great superhero film and a great way to start this franchise. Coming in at number 5 is X-Men 2. This one was easily the best of the original trilogy, just by a scotch of the original X-Men. It basically takes what was great about the original X-Men and basically cranks up that bitch. You get bigger action sequences, you got great character moments, you get Stryker in here and his plan to kill all mutants by using Charles Xavier and Stryker's son. Then you learn about Wolverine's origins, and then you have Magneto, who somewhat hates the X-Men, just so he can, pull a switcheroo to make Charles kill all the humans. That entire third act, in that facility, it's just one fun action scene after another. Especially seeing Jean Grey sacrificing herself where she becomes the Phoenix, which, sadly, The Last Stand botched that shit to hell. So, X-Men 2 is basically the definition, along with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, how you do a sequel to a comic book movie. Great, it's a great sequel that is very deserving to be in my top 5. Coming in at number 4 is Deadpool. After seeing how poorly executed of the version of the character we got in X-Men Origins Wolverine, I immediately knew that, the Deadpool movies were going to be significantly better, as if, that wouldn't be surprising. Ryan Reynolds, he pulls off everything he set out to do with this and does that tenfold and more. There are plenty of laughs. You have a great plot involving Deadpool, wanting to kill the guy who essentially made him Deadpool and trying to reconnect with his girlfriend, Vanessa. You have side characters like Colossus and Negasonic, and, they're all great allies for Deadpool, and you get plenty of good action scenes, pretty freaking brutal, but it's done in a comedic way. God bless Ryan Reynolds for getting the version of Deadpool that we rightfully deserve from the very start, and, just giving us one of the best one of the best origin stories for a superhero film. So, Deadpool, number 4. Coming in at number 3 is the new release, Deadpool and Wolverine. There is a chance, for this film to be ranked somewhere else in the future should I ever decide to re-rank this list. But this is where I'm going to place it. Deadpool and Wolverine is a fantastic experience that involves this timeline plot of Deadpool being pulled from his quiet life by the Time Variance Authority because his timeline is in danger, so he has to team up with a variation of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine to help save it. Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, they just have great chemistry as their characters. There's plenty of laughs, great action scenes, and we get really good cameos in this movie that have a narrative purpose, like in Spider-Man No Way Home. Also, to go along with that is that the film feels like a fond farewell to the Fox era of Marvel. And, it left me thinking that, what, if this is the last time we'll see Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, even though they did a perfect job with that in Logan, I'm glad it ends here. I mean, honestly, the less said the better. If you haven't seen the movie yet, the hell are you doing, man? Get in that theater and have a great time. So, yeah. Number 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. Coming in at number 2 is X-Men Days of Future Past. This one was easily, for me, the best ensemble X-Men film, where you essentially have the first class version of the X-Men characters and the original trilogy of the X-Men characters teaming up in this time travel plot of Wolverine having to travel to 1973 to get help from a young Charles Xavier to prevent Mystique killing Bolivar Trask, because it will cause a dystopian future 50 years later where essentially you have these Sentinels that are causing the mutants to essentially be extinct. I liked seeing Wolverine helping out the young version of Charles Xavier. And the development that James McAvoy's Charles Xavier gets in this is easily the best development for the Charles Xavier character. Mystique also easily gets the best development as a character in this franchise. And there are moments in this film where she acts like Rebecca Romijn's Mystique from the original trilogy. Of course, you get great action scenes, especially at the third act with the young Magneto going to kill President Nixon. And, even Quicksilver breaking out a young Magneto from the Pentagon. And I liked, seeing the way this movie ended. It was, essentially Bryan Singer giving a middle finger to The Last Stand in a way. So I could go on, but, it's going to make the video longer if I just keep going on. So, number 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. And of course, coming in at number 1, the greatest thing that this franchise has ever given us is Logan. This one completely blew me away on my first viewing. Hugh Jackman, he easily gives his best performance as his character in this franchise, and ranks up there with just flat out one of the best performances he's ever given as an actor. You have a great storyline of Wolverine, who is now being poisoned by the adamantium steel inside of him. And, he's hiding out in Mexico with Charles Xavier, who sadly caused a tragic event with the X-Men team. And Wolverine has to protect this little girl named X-23, who is essentially Logan's daughter because she was conceived by the same genes as him. The brutality of the action scenes are done very well, all the way up to the third act where he ultimately sacrifices himself for the girl and these kids. The villains were all done well, and the movie leaves you off with the perfect ending to Hugh Jackman's Wolverine from the original X-Men to this movie, Logan. And look, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, he is easily, that role is essentially going to go down in history as one of the greatest castings for a comic book character. Whoever plays the character for the MCU's version of the X-Men, that's definitely going to be some big shoes to fill. So we'll see how, they'll pull that off. So yeah, nothing else more to say about Logan. It's easily the greatest thing that this franchise has ever released. And so it deserves, in my opinion, to be number 1. Thank you guys so much for watching this ranking. Tell me how you feel about this ranking, and tell me how you would rank these movies in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, and to see more videos from me in the near future, hit the subscribe button and click that bell icon so you can get notified every single time I upload. I hope you all have a blessed life, and in case I don't ever get to meet you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.